Welcome back to Trending in Education. Dan Stratford, Mike Palmer along with you on this Thanksgiving Day. Happy gobble gobble to everyone. We're here to talk about gratefulness and the idea of learning it, a very in the now topic. Mike, something you like to maybe refer to as zeitgeisty. I got the first here on this episode, but how are you doing?
I'm good. And, Thanksgiving makes me think about thankfulness, the importance of gratitude, and turduckens, which are three-part portmanteaus. So the turducken is part turkey, part duck, part chicken.
That's right.
I believe, hang on, Dan. Let me see. I'm going to take a moment here. I think is it a chicken and a duck and a turkey?
That is how I've come to understand it, yes.
I guess it depends, right? Because like humans, chickens can come in all sizes as well as ducks and turkeys.
That's very right.
So you don't, it could be an inverse turducken or chidurkuk. I don't know. We're freestyling.
We're workshopping.
But anyway, happy Thanksgiving, Dan. Even though we're temporarily not in Thanksgiving, this is entering the universe on Thanksgiving, and we wanted to talk about the importance of thankfulness, gratitude. There's a bunch of articles that we've been reading. I'm thankful for articles. I'm thankful for the internet. I'm thankful for this show. I'm thankful for your stalwart co-hosting and producing. There's so many things to be thankful about, but just the turducken captured my initial thinking, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
It is a good one. I'm grateful for all of the above as well. This podcast and all of our listeners. I think that goes without saying. Hope everyone is having a happy Thanksgiving. For those who are celebrating here in the States, those abroad, welcome to a Thursday and to Trending in Education. But we do appreciate you listening as well. Of course, we are going to talk about learning to be grateful and the idea therein. There are a couple articles out there on maybe how to focus more on that. An interesting article from HBR about why and how to be grateful intentionally, how to be more intentional about it and what the effects of your gratefulness are, and one around being grateful for higher education. All of those, I think, interesting topics to dive into today. But I do want to start off, you already hit on the turducken. What's your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
Wow. Yeah.
Heavy hitting here at the top.
I know. You're really pulling no punches. I like mashed potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie, but I also feel like bad mashed potatoes can ruin the meal. So I would say, mashed potatoes are kind of the litmus test of your Thanksgiving meal. So like I love, and I'm very thankful for good mashed potatoes. I'm frequently troubled and turned off to the whole experience when the mashed potatoes are not up to my liking. Are they like the prefab powdered kind? Are they lumpy in a way that doesn't make sense? Are they buttery enough? I don't know. But like, I think a lot, just as a little learning tip for those of you who are preparing Thanksgiving, no pressure. But if you're going mashed potatoes, same thing with stuffing too. Don't mail it in.
Right. Don't
mail in. If you take one thing away from this show today, don't mail in the stuffing or the mashed potatoes, because think of your postal carriers. It's Thanksgiving. You don't want to mail those things in. All right, Dan, let's get it together. It's like a bonus. It's a gift. Thanksgiving is a gift.
It's cornucopia, if you will.
You're welcome for this show. Where are we going?
I will say the thing you can mail in is cranberry sauce. It's got to come in the can. Give me the can.
You like a little jiggle to it?
A little jiggle to the cranberry sauce. Mix that in with the mashed potatoes and the stuffing, and I am set.
Yeah,
some turkey is fine as well. But
you like mixing your plate, right? Little like the intersectionality of the Thanksgiving plate, which is another show entirely.
Yes. And learning how to cook for Thanksgiving. I'm sure plenty of people are looking up YouTube videos or recipes online, and the idea of learning on the fly how to cook a turkey or mashed potatoes or stuffing is happening as people are also listening to this. So
learning how to, because frequently at a good Thanksgiving table, there's more serving plates than there is room to put them on the table. So like it is sort of like a team building exercise. And again, just like mashed potatoes, I've had good Thanksgivings where like, man, we're like a synchronized swim team here. Look at how we're passing the green beans and the stuffing, and we know who likes what. And then there's also those times where you're like, oh my God, we haven't even started talking about politics and we already have supply chain problems. Like the mashed potatoes, like,
they're on the wrong end of the table.
Oh my God. And that uncle's over serving himself, which is a whole nother.
Somebody put the hot gravy in front of the baby, and it's
gravies and babies.
Bad situation. But we dive in here with this Inc.com article on these 5 brain hacks will help you become more grateful. This is from John Hall, who is listed as co-founder and president of Calendar. We'll look up exactly what that role entails, but he has a book out, Top of Mind, that he uses to discuss being grateful as well. During the holidays, it is important to do so. So it's a list, Mike. We like lists here on the show. I will admit, I don't find any of these earth-shattering. I don't think there's anything that is being breaking news, but it is good to see in a list form ways to sort of center yourself, maybe a little bit more mindful about learning how to be grateful. But would you like to run down the list, or would you care for me to run down the list here on the show?
I'll run down the list, but shot fired, Dan. Wow.
Being honest. I'm grateful for honesty.
It's Thanksgiving. First off, I would like to thank John Hall for the time he took to put together his thoughts for the 5 ways in which we can all learn to be more grateful. So, nice job, John. Thank you for that. And apologies for Dan. But yeah, maybe not overly surprising, but let's take a little stroll through them because it is Thanksgiving, right? And folks probably have time, unless you're cooking, in which case this could be on while you're preparing things. So first, remind yourself to thank the people who lend you a hand, right? So sure. And this is where you mentioned it, Dan, but like the connection between mindfulness and gratitude. Russell Glass talked about that when we were talking about Ginger and behavioral health apps and sort of the mindfulness movement. There's a related movement around the importance of gratitude, particularly as we enter an increasingly narcissistic, self-centered universe. It's important to understand how, none of us really operate entirely in isolation of others, no matter how much we seem like we have our act together. The act is a collaborative effort, and frequently it's easy to forget the people who are making you better at life. So that's a good one. Second one is start your day with intentional gratitude. This is the one that, even though you may have heard it before, I think is important. I've heard a lot of stuff in the self-improvement space around the first thing you do after you wake up, and how that's like a really, beginnings and endings are really important, and the beginning of your day is super important. I would kind of tack on, because I don't think it made his top 5, is similar reflection at the end of the day, like looking back on like, what happened today that was really special, like who was able to help me today. But before you just, reach for your phone and sort of dive into your typical routines, taking a moment to just be reflective and to think about what you're grateful for. For those of us, not to overplay the early parent card, but when you have a young child, you're frequently immediately confronted with the fact that you have a young child, because they frequently are what wakes you up. So it's important, I think, to remember that you're thankful for that. And then as someone who for many, many years didn't have a young child, if you wake up and can have a moment to be reflective and thankful, be thankful for that. Like you have a little bit of peace and quiet in your morning. So good job by you. So that's that. Experiencing different cultures is number 3. So be thankful for the opportunity to be exposed to more than your narrow slice of the world and of consciousness in the 21st century. There are plenty of ways to diversify that understanding. I think this is John's way to say, try to get out there, see other things, experience other things, and then, gratitude only comes upon reflection. So reflect on those experiences, which is great. Number 4 is surround yourself with grateful people. So they'll make you feel better because they'll be appreciative of you. And then also, like, the flip side is also true. Like people who aren't grateful, people aren't appreciative of you, maybe takers and toxic, and just being smart about that is a good thing. If you've been clever enough to navigate your life so that you're not surrounded by takers and instead people who are grateful for where they are and what they have access to is important. And then the last one is put yourself in someone else's shoes, which is sort of the power of empathy and theory of mind and the ability to sort of step outside of yourself from time to time. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, so to speak. But maybe not overly deep cuts, but I think there's some truth in all of them. And I for one was grateful for the effort that Inc.com and John Hall put in putting that article together.
Well, I think the thing that happens with a lot of these sort of lists is individually they all make sense, but bringing them together to make a finer point is what I think John Hall does here around the multiple steps you can take to get to a place where you understand being grateful and you understand how to get there at a higher plane, or whatever sort of phrase you want to use there, on a more regular basis. It's pretty easy to be grateful when something happens, right? Mm-hmm. Someone holds a door open for you, you say thank you. Or when someone brings you soup when you're sick, you say thank you. But being consistently grateful and acknowledging things you're grateful for. I'll use an anecdotal personal story. My wife a while back instituted what we call calm down with our kids. And basically it was meant because our middle child was having trouble getting to sleep. It was meant to sort of just relax them and focus their attention. But what we do is it's sort of the rose and thorn exercise. Some people use in icebreakers. We talk about one thing that they love from their day, one thing that made them sad or made them upset from their day. Then we talk about 3 things they're grateful for and what they're looking forward to tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So that we do that every night before bed, so that we're talking about the day that was and the day that's coming. And we allow them to say, now typically what they're grateful for is pretty static. It's usually the same 3 answers or similar answers.
Yeah.
So they buck that trend and get outside the box. But I think, and this is to my wife's credit, it's making them think about it outside of the moment of being grateful. And I do think that's what John here, my shade before aside, I do think this sort of article allows people to think larger and broader than in the moment gratitude, mm-hmm. and learn more about how to do things like that, which is important. It's being grateful for all things all the time rather than just in the moment when it matters.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we talk a lot about the importance of intentionality, like actually intending to do the things you do rather than doing them reflexively or automatically. And I don't think we necessarily prepped this article, but I have seen, I think it might have been Ariana Huffington on Thrive talking about or something related, where rather than saying thank you, say I'm grateful. And any ways in which you can signal that I'm not just almost behavioral, using the words that I've been trained to use to be courteous, but instead I'm noticing something very specific and I'm very consciously aware of something about someone else besides myself. And I want to make sure that that person understands that I've noticed that and I'm appreciating it. Any kind of like awareness of other, which I think comes up in the Harvard Business Review article, which we'll share out as well, I think is really what thankfulness is about. And the other could be other people around you. It could also just be, your circumstances.
Right.
But I think anything that is not really internal in its focus and instead is more about others, even if it winds up being a little bit artificial at first, I think when you get in the practice of doing that, I think it starts to change how you think. And that's also what's interesting about a lot of these sort of more the behavioral aspects of gratitude, is that there are neurochemical connections, both to the individual who's then saying I'm thankful for something, but also to the person who hears it.
Yep.
So like, this is one of those things where virtue is its own reward, where if you can be genuinely grateful to others for their contributions to your life, they'll appreciate you more and it will net benefit you more, which is why it is a bit of a life hack. Like it is actually a way to kind of build collaboration and trust and good feeling. And even if it sort of breaks from some of the conventions around I, me, my, uh, and even if it is ultimately narcissistic or
Right.
self-interested, um, it is interesting to see that there's a growing body of research that's saying people who understand that they're not alone and that they actually need help and that they're reliant on others, and that those who can then not only be aware of that, but then call out through what they say and do, that they realize they're dependent on others and that they appreciate that, um, generally have an advantage over those who make everything about how great they are.
Yep.
And then it's particularly important in the culture of narcissism that we're kind of living in nowadays, where everybody is about themselves, the projects they're working on, their own stories that they want to tell. So like any ways in which you can force yourself to kind of break out of that habit, I think are ultimately in your best interest, but I think also will likely build friends and partners in your life. So yeah, it's being thankful. It's good. It's good practice, and it's good
for
for
you.
you.
Yeah, it's good for you. And I think it's a great point and yes, maybe ultimately it is narcissistic or self-serving, but it does build, right? It builds on itself. It builds friendships, it builds partnerships, it builds trust.
Yeah.
And that is just something that is immensely important in work life, in home life, in parenting, and all those things. So
Yeah. It reminds
gratitude.
me. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like the marshmallow test. Like anything you could do to kind of like get past your first reaction, which is like, oh, there's a marshmallow on the table, I'm going to eat it. Or, man, those mashed potatoes look good, I'm going to chow right down.
Right.
If instead you give it to your cousin first rather than serve yourself, it's a signal that you can control your reptile brain to the point of being other focused rather than self focused. And if even, in the back of your mind, maybe in your prefrontal cortex somewhere, you understand that ultimately this game theory will net benefits for me. If everybody operated that way, the world would be a much better place.
Right. And you'd get more for yourself in the end.
Yeah.
In context, I will point out, nice callback by you, and I'm appreciative of and grateful for this callback to Thrive Global. It was an article by Jeff Hayden from February of this year,
Yeah.
who is it says a Inc. contributing editor. So I'm not sure if that
Sure.
refers to Thrive Global or to Inc., which we're referencing here on this other article, but it is saying I'm grateful rather than thank you.
Yeah.
And it's discussing Chick-fil-A actually as sort of the jumping off point, where the workers there use my pleasure rather
Yep.
than you're welcome. And then it also talks about the power of praise and how praise can work to feel better about yourself, not just about praising the other person and making them feel better, which I think segues into the HBR article that you've already referenced.
Yeah.
That is from 2016, just for context, but it's been reshared this time of year on LinkedIn pretty much every year since then.
Thanksgiving.
Exactly. So it's from Heidi Grant. This is from June 29, 2016 originally, and it's a Harvard Business Review article called Stop Making Gratitude All About You.
Yeah.
And so the context here, Mike, as you've already alluded to, is that in thanking people and saying how you feel from it specifically is maybe a negative as compared to saying praising them for their gratefulness.
Yes.
And so it's a little bit meta and it's a little bit above the discussion, but is similar in sense of, and I think what we talked about before recording and the point I want to make is, I think the point it makes, or what I got from it, is that the intentionality of the words we use and how we speak to one another does matter. And studying that and seeing the effects therein matter. I was a little, flip and glib when I first reacted to it, saying, well, just be kinder to people and you want me to be grateful for you being grateful. Great. But I do think there's some substance here about how we interact with people, how we speak to each other, and the language we use and how it positively or negatively affects one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think signaling that you're able to step outside of your own sort of knee-jerk egotism, which we all have. So like there is sort of
I
like
thought you were saying that to me.
yeah, you're not a knee-jerk and you're not an egotist, no more so than any of us are. But I'm not knee-jerking you around here, Dan. But like I think there is a natural tendency to be about yourself that we all share. It's part of what it means to be human. But I think like at least having the ability to change your frame of reference to have you not be the exclusive protagonist in your own narrative and understand that other narratives coexist with your own. There are ways in which language can get you there. And then generally speaking, this is also why, I'm not a big fan of autocomplete and sort of language that the algorithm feeds you, because it tends to be lazy. And, just saying thank you is clearly better than not saying anything. But if what you say rather than thank you is more something specific and relevant to the individual who's talking to you, and then regardless of whether it's thankful or I'm grateful, if you're actually specifying the behavior or you're specifying the attributes of the other, it's just a reminder to the people who you're dealing with in your day-to-day that you don't think of the world as entirely about you. Even if that is to our meta point, and we'll keep going in circles on this, but even if that is in some ways ultimately in service of your own net benefit, it still signals like, I don't think about it just as me. Like, and any ways in which we can get out of that trap, I think is ultimately beneficial. And then a lot of the neuroscience research is showing that it's actually better for you. It's healthier to be grateful and to take time to reflect on these types of things. And Thanksgiving's a great time to do it, right?
It is. We have another personal story. We have a thankful tree in our house this year, where it's a tree with leaves that you can write what you're thankful for and put it up there. And it always manages to become a battle between my two older daughters for who can put the most up there or that they're grateful for. But a little competition, it goes a long way amongst siblings. It's fine.
Hopefully it doesn't turn into the giving tree, right? So,
right, very true.
Which is another call out to Adam Grant, who's done a ton of work on give and take around organizational psychology. He just wrote a children's book, which is interesting too. It's sort of talking about the importance of giving.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
The importance of raising children. I think he likes to. It's similar language games, really, where it's like when your child is generous, rather than saying "nice job," instead saying "you're a giver." I like how you did that because you're a generous soul. So the more you're attributing generosity in your children and in the people you're around as like sort of their root metaphor, their root, the root attribution of their behavior, it's more likely they begin to internalize that rather than say, "Oh, good job by you. You gave that to me." Right. In which case it's really just "good job by you" is sort of their takeaway from that. So you can get stuck in your head about what language you use, but like, I think it's also more the flip side is the risk that like, if you're never intentional about that language, and if you're not thinking about what it might mean to the listener, all this really is talking about the importance of empathy. I think there's a risk that you don't get as far as you might had you just sort of done some behavioral hacks to your own ways of expressing yourself that ultimately will be beneficial to you, to your children, to the people you're around.
Similar, my wife's gone down that path with the positive reinforcement of behavior and doing the things you're discussing that Adam Grant has the book out about now. But I do think it's first hearing something like that. I think it's very easy to say, well, I'd be faking it, right? I'd be faking this gratitude. I'd be faking this language. I'd be, intentionally changing for my own benefit the way I'm talking to other people. And I will say that's a legitimate reaction to what Mike and I are talking about. But I do think twofold. One, it's interesting just that we can learn these things, that you can learn new language and learn new ways of talking to people, and it can be studied and it can be changed, and life hack or typical lifelong learning, whatever you want to call it, that's possible. And also think of it as just something new you're learning, and over time it takes practice. Insert Alvin Iverson here, but like it takes practice, it takes time, and it takes working those muscles up to do it naturally and just have it be part of who you are. So if you are someone who doesn't typically talk this way, don't shut it down and say, well, that's not going to happen for me. I do believe enough in growth mindset at this point that try it and see how it feels, and try it on for a little while and work at it and see how it makes you feel and the people around you feel.
Yeah, for sure. And Adam Grant wrote this book with his wife, Allison Sweet Grant. It's a nice name. Grant also is a giving name.
Yeah.
As you may take that for granted, Adam. Sorry.
Are you though? Are you sorry?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully you appreciate me making jokes, but it's called The Gift Inside the Box, and it's packaged like a gift with that's become self-aware, but it's not
I was
scary.
going to go to Seven,
Yeah,
the movie Seven at the end,
yeah,
and what's in the box. But
yeah.
so we do have this one last article, which is about higher education that probably closes out, or maybe we hit on a couple other things around gratefulness. But it's from a KUT.org. Which is Austin's NPR station. Austin, of course, where we will be in March for South by Southwest EDU, which is a nice tie-in here.
Yeah.
But it's about higher ed being grateful for the frustration that can come with learning. You'll learn from that too. This is from Jennifer Staten at KUT, and it's about a podcast. So it's sort of a podcast listen. I'll post that as well with Southwestern University President Dr. Ed Berger and KUT's Jen Staten. But it's interesting of almost being grateful for the pain, right, Mike? Grateful for the toughness of learning. I said before we started recording, reminds me of our Sans Forgetica episode,
Yep.
where desirable difficulty, the idea
Yes.
of pushing through that pain. I am grateful for that. And I'm grateful for challenges in learning. And I thought this was a nice little listen and read around be grateful for the climb, be grateful for the journey to learning something new.
Yeah, for sure. The struggle, right? So like, humanity, this depends on how much you want to lean into existential psychology, existential philosophy, but a lot of it talks about, the importance of suffering to like creating meaning in life. So like if things are never hard, there isn't as much meaning to them, which also I think can start moving you into the problem of affluenza, where when you're entitled, everything's given to you. In some ways your life may wind up being more shallow than the life that involves a struggle. Reminds me a little bit of David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell as well, where it's sort of like the advantage of being an underdog is that you have tremendous motivation and nobody believes in us, chip on your shoulder that allows you to sort of self-motivate and have the grit and the effort necessary to succeed. I think that's sort of the angle that this article takes, which is if you learn to accept and embrace the hard parts of life, it will ultimately make you better. Reminds me also of grit, where practice is hard, and doing the reps can be tough. Like doing the hard work is needed to become really good at things. And, the people who really excel at that, great athletes, great thinkers, great writers, they lean into the daily practice, the will to lean into the hard work that is necessary to truly become great. Best case, you can align that to some higher level sense of purpose, which frequently can allow you to motivate. So like, I am going to be the best basketball player in the world. Therefore, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 hours in the gym every morning, really just, grinding it out. LeBron James, great example of that, where like he's a tremendously gifted athlete, but he's able to motivate himself and build that into his own identity. Maybe there was some help from the outside to do that, which is also gets back to that previous point of saying like, you're a hard worker.
Right.
But the more you can learn that, when challenges present, it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your true character. And if you never are facing those challenges, you almost need to seek them out. Because if you're comfortable in this day and age, you're probably not challenging yourself enough. So like, I think that is that element of, if you're uncomfortable, you're probably learning. And if you're embracing desirable difficulty, And if you're thankful for those who are challenging you to kind of get out of your comfort zone, you're ultimately going to be put into increasingly challenging circumstances. And by virtue of doing that, you'll overcome that imposter syndrome if you keep getting in there. And then eventually you'll become more than what you are today. And at the end of the day, that's really what it is to be human. And that is, what we want to remind ourselves to be thankful about.
Any final thoughts as we come to a close here on our Thanksgiving Day podcast, whether on thankfulness, gratefulness, or topics that we've discussed here on the podcast?
Pie.
That's where your thoughts go. I understand.
I'm very thankful for pi, both the transcendental number, also the peak end of any great Thanksgiving is pi.
Oh, you're not saying that's not a different pronunciation of pecan. Peak end. Got it.
Okay. Oh, got it. Yeah, the peak end theory, basically meaning if you end let's say the mashed potatoes were dry, everything was dry, you ran out of gravy, the conversation got political, you were sitting next to the cousin you're not particularly fond of, right. Like et cetera, et cetera.
Crazy Uncle Steve.
But if it ends with pie, you may just allow yourself to be present and enjoy some pie, because like I'm not even a huge pumpkin pie guy, but if it's Thanksgiving, I kind of want a little pumpkin pie.
Sure.
And it's sort of like Thanksgiving has a lot of those moments where it's like, as far as holidays go, it has its own special, like they got the branding right. Like, what it feels like to be in Thanksgiving. It's also a somewhat secular holiday, despite whatever the conversation may be around the table. So like, it's a nice opportunity to just embrace what it means to be human nowadays and maybe savor a nice moment or two, perhaps with some pecan, sweet potato, maybe a little blueberry,
apple crisp, all the way.
Apple crisp, depending on your persuasion, maybe some mousses, some soufflés, like knock yourself out. Don't forget dessert, I guess is my thing.
Well, I do. So, leave them wanting more, and yeah. It's how you start and how you finish.
Save some room for dessert.
It's all about the appetizers and the dessert here on Trending in Education.
Yeah.
Don't forget, we are with you on Twitter at Trending in Ed. Same on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Trending in Education. We want to have the conversation not only here on the show, but afterwards as well with all of our listeners. So find us on one of those platforms. Continue this conversation. Let us know about gratefulness and how you've learned or how you plan on learning to be a bit more grateful. Mike, final thought?
Dan, I just wanted to let you know I very much appreciate your contribution every time we do this show. And I just wanted to say I'm grateful for all the energy and engagement that you provide me and our listeners every time we do this show.
That makes me feel really nice, Mike. I appreciate that.
And hopefully our listeners' cockles are warmed.
Down to the cockles. Obviously, we appreciate each and every one of you listeners and hope you have a great holiday as we head into the holiday season as well. We will have an episode in the future on holiday gift giving and gifts for lifelong learners and children learners. So look forward to that and tons of great content coming down the pike in December. So really look forward to sharing that with each and every one of you. Until next time, you've been listening to Trending in Education.